Hey there, it's Irene Line. Welcome to this video and to this YouTube channel and to this world of healing trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. I want to tackle a question today that we're getting a lot more. I think it's because it's becoming more popular in the mainstream media, popular press. There's a lot of podcasts that are talking about this, and that is whether or not ice bathing or being in freezing cold water for periods of time is good for the health. And there's a lot of health benefits and claims, and rather than me say, yes, it's good or yes, it's bad, I just want to break down the physiology of what's going on when we are in such an environment. And to understand that, to understand this concept of the physiology and extreme temperatures, it's important to understand, first of all, quick review, the autonomic nervous system. And this is what I talk about on this channel. So I have many other videos that go into this a bit deeper. So I'm going to post a few of those below. Part of my trauma tip series. The other thing I'm going to get into in this video, but I'm not going to dive into it fully, is what it takes to build a healthy human being. And to understand that, we have to understand what the vagus nerve is. So the vagus nerve, it's one of our cranial nerves, comes out of our cranium, and it travels all over the body. It's called the wandering nerve for good reason. There are many, many branches, goes to our face, throat, heart, diaphragm, digestion, reproductive organs, kidneys, all of our viscera. It travels everywhere. And the nerve is important for us to understand when we get into this concept of whether or not being in cold water for long periods of time is good for us, can it heal us, etc. Now, the first thing that I want to just sort of as a kind of overall caveat is that I get a lot of questions where it's like, does this help for this? Does this help for that? What about this, Irene, et cetera, et cetera. And here's the thing. You have to become your own guru, to kind of steal a concept from the documentary that Tony Robbins was highlighted in, Be Your Own Guru. You know, I'm not your guru. I am a professional. I can teach you a lot of stuff, but what you do for you, you have to feel into it. You have to test it out. You have to get the information. And right now, I think there's so much information that we get really confused about what is right, what isn't right. Things that we were told back in the 50s are no longer true. You know, if we think about cholesterol and heart disease, we know that that doesn't link up, and we're still correcting that misinformation from back then that we were given by, the scientists and researchers. So here's what we need to understand when it comes to cold water, the health of the nervous system, the body. Part of the nervous system that protects us. So if we go into extreme situations where it's like deathly, I think I might die, the system's going into like, this is not good, it'll go into what's called a shutdown response. And when we're born as babies, that part of our system, our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, is highly online. It is the primitive, it's called the primitive part of our nervous system. It's the parasympathetic, but there's another branch here. It's called the dorsal branch of the parasympathetic. This is where the vagus nerve comes in. A researcher by the name of Stephen Porges, he developed this theory. It's more than a theory, it's real. It's called the polyvagal theory, and it shows how humans and mammals, we have a very sophisticated nervous system, and part of that is the vagus nerve. And it comes out of our brain stem and it travels to our face and throat and heart and diaphragm, and under the diaphragm it governs so much stuff. I won't get into the entire branches of it, but suffices to say there is this branch of the parasympathetic called the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic. And it is a very primitive part of our nervous system. And it is what puts us into shutdown and shock. So if I was to, knock on wood, heaven forbid this doesn't happen, but lacerate my major femoral artery or something like that, or break a bone, my system would be like, danger, danger, blood pressure, right? Heart rate down. Everything would draw in. Everything would go down so I don't bleed out, right? It also helps numb out the system. We want this. We want to have these survival mechanisms ready to go when we need them. But as humans, us humans here, we are designed to be in high levels of social interaction, connection, and something called the low tone dorsal. So this is where it gets a little more complex. The low tone dorsal is that true rest digest. The system is in more of a slow down mode, but it's not shut down. It's like a gear of a car. So the engine isn't shut down or it isn't revving like fight flight would be. It's just in this sort of chilled out, it's rejuvenating, tissues being repaired, the digestion is happening, we're enhancing our immune system, the gut's repairing, all that good stuff. So low tone dorsal is the true rest digest of the parasympathetic. Okay, I'm going to get to the cold water in a bit. Doing something like having a quick cold rinse after a shower, or I've been to places, hot springs, where you get into hot water and then you dunk really quickly into the snow, or under a cold shower for like a few seconds. That shocks the system, it shifts the circulation, it drives basically the lymph. That, in my opinion, is quite healthy. The trouble when we are in deep cold water and we're immersed for long periods of time, and we feel the pain in our skin and we feel the system freak out a little bit, and then all of a sudden we calm, that is that high tone dorsal complex, the high tone dorsal, the dorsal vagal complex of the parasympathetic kicking in. It is literally cueing into danger, danger. As a human being, you cannot survive in that kind of cold weather or environment. So our nervous system, as brilliant as it is, because it literally shifts the gear into this high tone dorsal. Everything calms down, everything slows down. It feels a little loopy, a little kind of out there, a little hazy, because it's putting us into preparation for death. And I know that might seem a little extreme, but that's what occurs. Now, if you do that once, not a big deal, right? Let's just say for whatever reason you're stuck in that kind of situation, the system will bounce back. But the problem is, and from what I'm seeing, if we are doing this daily, it's literally priming the system to be really good at going into shutdown. And it's even in some ways going into shutdown and then coming out of it is like a kind of a euphoric feeling, because the system is turning back on. It's, I think about, the Starship Enterprise or some kind of, vessel, is all of a sudden it's like everything's been quiet and then everything comes back up. And what I'm seeing is almost this addiction in a way to these cold baths. Very different than the cold rinse, like actually immersing and staying in there. And the thing is if we train our system to do this over and over again, it's going to go into that, it's going to learn how to go into that dorsal a lot easier. And we don't want to live there as human beings. We want to live in sort of two spaces. One is the rest digest phase of the parasympathetic. That's like the recovery, the repair, where your immune system is enhancing. That's what's going on when you're really chilling out, usually by yourself, or when you're sleeping. And then we want to live, for the most part, in this what's called ventral vagal portion of the parasympathetic. That's where our brain is turned on in the creative ways. It's being with people, it's interacting, it's having a good time, it's having fun. And then of course a bit of sympathetic, where we're using our bodies, where we're moving, where we're exercising. But the thing is, we don't want to be living and putting ourselves purposely into survival stress physiology. And the thing that's very alluring about the cold, like the deep cold, staying in that water for a long time, is it can become, like I said, this sense of kind of numbed out euphoria, and it can become very addicting. So I just want to say, to caution this. Watch your physiology, watch what's going on. If you do this, if you practice this, I think that there's this potential for us to train ourselves to faint, to pass out, to go into deep, deep dorsal. And here's what's interesting. Animals that live in the ocean, there's actually something called the dive reflex. And we think of the sea creatures in that as primitive. The reason they can stay low, low, low in the ocean and near the ocean floor with very little oxygen is because they are primed to live in their dorsal. So the dorsal vagal nerve, this parasympathetic high tone dorsal, they're brilliant at that, but they're also not humans, right? They're different. We're different. And so they have adapted their physiology to stay in cold, cold water, low in the ocean, very little oxygen, and they thrive off of that. We are not that way. We have that dive reflex in us, which puts us into shock, but we certainly do not want to train ourselves to go into that. So just a little thing to think about. Be sure, as I said at the very beginning of this, do your research, learn about it, see what is going on in the physiology. I've just given you really a rundown of it. And you got to kind of go with your gut, learn how to listen to your gut rather than, kind of hopping on the next fad, the next train and trying that out. From what I've experienced in all my years doing this work, helping people heal at this nervous system level, healing trauma, restoring basically their physiology back to a space where maybe they've never been before, what I've learned is that this is something that we don't want to look for that quick fix. We don't want to look for something that's just going to shock our system into kind of a different state, because it will feel different, right? We will have this activation of the system and things will then deactivate and we will feel a shift. In many ways, when we've been stuck in such a traumatic, let's say, physiology, feeling a shift feels like a relief. It feels great, right? I mean, this is why people end up abusing substances and food and exercise and all the things that we humans do to help regulate or find regulation in our system. But my interest and my passion and what I do with my clients and participants in my programs is we want to kind of restructure the entire organism, how we relate to ourselves and our internal physiology, how we relate to the environment, and how we bring more safety and regulation back to the nervous system. So to go back, we want to learn, or we want to be taught and do the apprenticeship of learning what it means to come into that low tone dorsal, that true rest digest, and also how can we reestablish our ventral vagal of the parasympathetic, which is that pro-social. And here's the thing, when we've had traumatic pasts and adversities, typically it's because of other humans in our life that were not safe, whether it was our parents, someone that abused us, or all of the above. So our desire to be pro-social and to connect and be raw and real and authentic and really let our guard down, it may not be quite there. But one of the parts of healing at this level is slowly restoring that safety, the safe haven back to the system, so that we get out of survival, we get out of that high tone dorsal and living in fight flight, so that we can bring us back to healing, back to restoration, back to regulation, back to our immune system, turning back on as opposed to it attacking us. And then of course, when we get into this more safe situation in our cells, we are then more able to connect with other human beings and really see the bigger picture in our world. So there you go. That's a little different kind of explanation. Again, like I said, we've been getting this question a lot. It's becoming popular, and I'm just here to say, do your research, check in with your own gut, see if it feels good to you, and learn the science. And we're just not meant to be in that kind of deep, cold water for prolonged periods of time, all the time, even as a daily practice. In my opinion, it's a bit too much. Take very good care, and we will see you next time.